A novel within 180 days. I know it's possible because I've just completed mine. Hello, my name is Keith Hayden, and welcome to the Digital Novelist Podcast. And today, in this episode, I am going to debrief my most recent novel project, Gates of Okinawa, a supernatural horror novel. If you're interested in a story about Japanese folklore, or that includes Japanese folklore from a novel perspective of, pun intended, novel perspective of a military spouse in Okinawa, then you should definitely check out this book that I just put out. It's a lot of fun, and I'm really proud of it. You'll find the link in the description around this video. If you are one of those people who have never written a novel, or you're working on your first novel, this is something that you're going to want to hear. You're going to want to hear what I talk about in this recording because, I'm just going to go over some of the things that I learned and talk about this process of this novel coming together, and hopefully it'll help you in your current project. Rewind the clock 6 months back to May 21st of 2024. That's when I got the original idea for this novel. Initially, I thought that the goal was to write a James Patterson-esque genre fiction book that was highly targeted. And as a matter of fact, I was so confident in this project that I started to make a course around it called How to Write a Best-Selling Novel with AI. Now, before you turn this off, because I mentioned the word AI, I'm gonna talk about the use of AI. That's probably the first thing I'm going to cover because that spans the first iteration of this novel and why it didn't really work for me, and what my end conclusion is when it comes to at least my personal preference of using AI when it comes to writing a full-blown novel. Originally, I recorded the first several days of this project. I recorded videos of me initially conceiving the idea, the premise, the main characters, everything. And I was going to put it out into this course. I've since changed the name. It turned out not to be. Well, who knows? It still could be a bestseller. But one of the reasons I changed the name from How to Write a Best-Selling Novel with AI is because I didn't like the AI chapters. And if you go back a few episodes of this podcast, actually to the very first episode of this podcast, because I started this podcast in about midway through the development of this novel, then the first episode is me talking about how this first 21 chapters that I wrote, pretty much 90% with AI, were bullshit. They sucked. They were repetitive. They were boring. They just unfocused. Just all of the typical stuff you come to expect with writing with AI. And that's not to say that the technology won't get better. And I've watched it improve. I've watched it very closely over the past 2 years. And I'm recording this. It's almost the 2-year anniversary of when ChatGPT first came out. But it's improved since then. But when it comes to long form works, it just doesn't have that continuity. It doesn't have the clarity. And this is me like tailoring it. I'm not just telling you, write me a novel, whatever. No, I do my outlining. I have a whole process that I outline, and I know how to work with AI very well. But this was the first lesson learned, is that I feel like if you're gonna write with AI, it's got to be kind of this all or nothing thing, and you probably shouldn't use it for a full novel, at least for the initial prose. Editing, other types of things, research, whatever, you can go to town. But for the initial ideas of your novel, I would stay away from AI, just because what I found was, in the second draft, it really came back to bite me in the ass, because a few of the chapters that I wrote using AI they just needed a lot more work. There was a lot more time that I had to take to. I basically had to rewrite most of those chapters anyway. So save yourself the ass pain up front and just write it yourself. Or what I found AI is good at is expanding on things. So what I would do next time, instead of including writing with just saying, here's my idea, write the AI, or I have this briefs method, which you can go back on my YouTube channel and find where I talk about the AI briefs method, what I call AI briefs. Instead of doing that is I would just write my idea for the chapter, no matter how sparse, even if it's just 500 words or less. And then I would say, here's what I'm trying to do. Can you help me expand this? And then I would go about that. But I would not do it the way I did it this time, because that added an extra easily month and a half to the development of this project, because I had to go back and rewrite those chapters. So that's the first lesson learned. Second lesson learned is around marketing strategy. One of the really difficult parts about marketing a novel is you don't know what it's going to be about in the beginning. Maybe you have an idea, maybe you have a premise, but that alone is not enough to really convince somebody to try it out or to get hyped about it. It just doesn't work alone. I've tried it. But what I did this time was, it was pretty effective in spreading the word, is that, okay, I didn't have, of course, I didn't know what the novel was going to be, what the selling points of the novel would be in the end. But what I did do is I did a great job of documenting my process as I was writing the first draft. And I think you have to do this on the first draft, because when you write the first draft, the ideas are fresh. You're off that writer's high, so to speak, of you just came up with this cool idea. You just came up with this cool scene idea, this cool character, this cool world building concept. And after you get past that first draft and then you get into the second draft and certainly a third draft, it just becomes more mechanical. Like you start to get, that's when I know a book is almost ready to be out, is if I'm getting tired of reading my own shit. And because you've seen it so many times, the story doesn't surprise you anymore. You already know it's just work, it's grind at that point. And I'll talk a lot more about that in the final sprint section, what I learned about that. But when it's the first draft, it's just this new world. You're discovering your story, and that is the best time to stop and record your thoughts about what you just wrote. Where did that idea come from? Why did you put it in there? What was the motivation? There's just so much more raw. And I look back at some of the videos and audio recordings that I made as I was writing that first draft during the summer, and all of the above is there. Just kind of the enthusiasm, the fun, the passion for the story is there. Not to say it still won't be there at the end, but it's less, I'm telling you, it's less likely to be there. And then the other thing is, you probably won't remember as clearly where some of these things came from after it's been 2-3 months down the line, because you have so much technical work to do to get the book out and get it clean and get it ready for publishing, that you're going to lose that. So this was my marketing strategy. What I would do is every day that I would write, my goal was 1 chapter a day. I would write a chapter, I would get the idea down, and then I would deliberately stop, either do a blog post, do a audio recording, video recording, whatever, and then I'd post it on social media or post it on my website. It's just that it. It's that simple. And this can take some practice, especially if you're not used to making content. I have years of making content on social media before I wrote this novel, so it does require some practice. You're not going to get it down, but even if you don't post them and you have a repository, which is ultimately what I did with these, I made a product just kind of having the behind the scenes of making this novel, to where somebody could buy the novel, but then they get this behind the scenes. And I think that's a really cool way to show your work, to have a repository, and then just this feeling like if you go and Google search Gates of Okinawa novel on Google, the entire page is my novel. It's videos that I made, it's blog posts, it's the actual novel, it's the website, all that stuff. And that's another thing that I mentioned in this part. This may sound backwards to some people, but creating a concept cover art and a website, those are two things that helped. I did those early on in this cycle for this project, and those really helped to just legitimize the project in my eyes and into the eyes of people who saw, as well as as it matured and I added more things to it. It's just a good way to get started, because a lot of us writers, we wait, if we do it at all, we wait until the end to do these things. Oh, okay, I'm done with the second draft. Now I need a website. Now I need a cover. No, these are two things that are strong signals to outsiders that you're serious about this book. You plan on filling it with a story, and people can start to get hyped. Even if you go back and change things, like I had to go back and change a lot of things about Gates of Okinawa in these last few days. I had to change the blurb. I had to change the genres, because it started out as an alien fiction story, and then about halfway through the first draft, I was like, this is turning into more of a horror type supernatural. So even if you change genres, it doesn't matter. It's just better to have something up to signal to yourself more than anybody else that this book is coming out, and look for it at some point in the future. And that gets you more in the mindset of finishing. I could talk a lot more about novel marketing. If you're interested, or if you want help with this stuff, then hit me up on my website, keithhayden.net, because there's a lot more to it than I'm really summarizing here, but I could talk a lot longer about specific things that I did and how I put things out and how I structured certain things. But yeah, it's a lot. So if you want some help, hit me up. The third lesson was writing every day really helped me to the lesson is basically, I'm glad I wrote every day, and you should write every day too, especially if you're trying to put out a novel, and especially if you want to finish in 180 days. As I mentioned, I did one chapter a day, especially on the first draft, and that just kept my momentum up, because I remember my first novel, I wrote every day for about 2.5 months, and then maybe it was 3 months, and then I stopped. I stopped for a good 3 months. And when I came back, I had such a hard time getting back into the groove, figuring out, okay, what was I talking about? Where's the story at? And I feel like that's how you write a better novel, is you keep everything kind of on the same wavelength. And not, of course, there's people who take years, decades to finish one novel. But I feel like that continuity will be more apparent if it stays top of mind, if it stays in the background process. And trust me, you will get tired of it. I know I did. Of just every day thinking about it, or writing another chapter, or editing another chapter later on, or rewriting. It does get tedious, but your story is just percolating. It's just in the background, even if you're not writing, or even if you're doing something else. And I found that to be very helpful. I also worked on my craft a lot, so that allowed me to experiment more thoughtfully with my craft, because I knew, okay, let me go try this method, and let me try that, and then I'd be reading other things I could incorporate into the story. So bottom line is, it's easier to grow as a writer, and it's easier to finish faster, of course, if you are writing every day. The next thing, I'm looking at what I wrote down. Can't read my own writing. Okay, this goes back to kind of marketing and how I was really happy with how I created different assets for this as I was going. And that was kind of the cool part about this, doing this in 6 months, was that I didn't just finish the book and get it out in the 6 months. I made websites, I made songs, I made graphics, I put out quotes from different parts of the book and different passages. I did a lot of stuff in that 6 months, and that was a good thing, because I feel like it just really contributed to the entire world. Like, you start building a world around your story, like not just on the page, but it expands out. And I thought that was a good thing. That's definitely something I'm gonna keep up in the future. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this final sprint part. I thought about not really talking about the first part of the novel, because I've talked about it a lot through all the other stuff that I made. As I mentioned, I made all those other videos and things. But this sprint part is something that I hadn't talked about at all, because I just finished it. About a little over 2 weeks ago, it's early November 24, I was, as I mentioned, I kind of have just this kind of trotting pace when it comes to novel writing, a little bit every day, and then eventually you get to the finish. But because I'd put this novel up for pre-order on Amazon, you're already kind of committing yourself to release the book on time. I had already pushed the deadline for this novel back. It was supposed to come out on Halloween in 24. It did not come out on Halloween, and I knew I had to push the deadline back. I wasn't even close to being done about a month ago. I pushed it back to this month, November of 24, and a little over 2 weeks ago, I realized, holy shit, I was about 2/3 done with the second draft, and this book needs to be completely done, signed, sealed, delivered in a little over 2 weeks. I was like, damn. So that began the sprint session, which took up the majority of this month. And when I say sprint, it's ridiculous. I wrote, rewrote, or edited over 35,000 words. That's about 30 chapters for this particular book. Some of the chapters are shorter. I also, my dumbass, decided that for the third draft, what I do for third draft is I like to read the book out loud. And I know not everybody will want to do this, because, some people don't like the sound of their own voice, and it just takes a long time than if you traditionally just edit or you send it off to an editor or whatever. But I like to read my stories out loud, because I feel like I can really catch weird phrasing. I can catch mistakes easier. I can catch just stuff that's just, it's a good polishing method for me. So I figured, I'm going to read the whole book anyway. I should just record the audiobook. Yeah. So I proceeded to record the audiobook, and for more or less a week straight, I barely did anything else. It was a nonstop effort. There were 2 sleepless all-nighters where I worked on the audiobook basically into the morning, and I barely made the deadline to submit the novel to Amazon. I made it with an hour to spare. Yeah, it was brutal. If you're wincing or you feeling stressed out right now just listening to that last part, then yeah, you're in the right place. You're in the right headspace, because it was brutal. I don't recommend this. It was very unhealthy. I felt like shit yesterday, so much so that yesterday was the day after I finished. I couldn't do anything. I didn't even turn on my computer. I couldn't even sit there. And even now, like all the stuff that I normally do, like getting back into my regular routine, I still haven't been able to do it yet because everything was just blown up by these last 2.5 weeks. Like I barely checked my email. Um, I barely checked messages. My wife was out of town, so that was helpful because the last few days, like I was just like, I wasn't in the headspace to do anything else other than look at the fucking book or record or write. It's a really bad place to be. I don't like being there for too long. It's pretty nasty. But I did want to talk about some of the things that I learned through this sprint. Because I've sprinted 3 times this year. Because the other thing that happened mid-development of this novel is I moved. And this is not a move down the street. This is a move different countries. I moved from Japan back to the US. So, of course, there was a huge work stoppage. I got really sick late July, early August. I got very sick. I was sick for about 2.5 weeks. So I was still working on the novel, but at a very, very slow pace. Like I was getting 1 chapter done, but that was basically about it. Like I couldn't do much else. So there was a lot that happened, but this final sprint was it felt like the final boss battle where it's like, okay, we're going to test everything you have left. You better empty the tank. What helped me get through this sprint? I wrote down a few things. The first thing that helped was just having a well-structured novel in the first place. And I was fortunate because Gates of Okinawa it's very simple structure. So bottom line is I didn't have to make any huge developmental adjustments to where like, okay, this chapter needs to change, this point of view needs to change. No, I basically just needed to write and execute my plan and just keep working. That helped me save a lot of time. It helped that I wrote a fairly competent first draft to where, because I know some people with first drafts, they're just like, just dump it all on and then go in and fix everything later. I don't do that. I do try and get to, I know outside of the bullshit AI chapters that I wrote this time, I really try to get to at least the structure is there. And then in the second draft, a lot of it is filling in, like connecting everything, making everything make sense together. And that's where the work comes in for me. So that helped me go faster. The second thing that helped me get through it is not second guessing myself. And I think this comes from just experience. This is my second novel. But I've written several other books, many this year actually. And I don't, sitting there fussing over a single word or fussing over, how we do sometimes. You know how we do. I know you do it too. I do it too. This is what we do as writers. You're like, that word is not quite right, or that sentence, or, you're trying to find the perfect word or phrase to put in this particular part. And you simply just cannot do that. You can't. You have to let it flow. You have to just let instinct take over. And hopefully you had a good enough plan. You had a good enough structure to where you can sprint, keep going. Because you literally do not have time to stop writing. And I think that's a good lesson, because I think that's what holds, and I've talked about this in other recordings, but that's what holds a lot of writers back is it's the perfectionist trap. It's like, well, should I include this in there? Should I do this point of view? Should I make this character say this type of thing? That's the hard part about writing novels is that literally anything goes. You can put anything you want in the story. But that holds us back because we don't decide on something to put in and then stick to it. We keep going back and changing it. We keep going back and second guessing what we wrote. We let other people see it and then we go, well, they didn't like this or they liked this. And then we use that as kind of as a reference to go back and change shit or whatever. It's like, no, the only person's opinion that matters at the end of the day is yours. Everybody else is going to think something else. You write your story and you got to get it down. And that's where I was at with this. So that helped a lot too. And this was something that I didn't write down, but the third thing that really helped me was really the physical stamina. And I don't talk about this very much, but it is one of those factors that really helps is, just basic health hygiene, like eating, drinking water, getting up. I would take breaks. I would try to take breaks every 25 to 30 minutes, like just get up and stand and things like that, because it is literally physically exhausting to sit for hours and hours and hours, which is what I was doing for the last 2 weeks, and just grind. Having that physical stamina was really helpful to help keep my head in the game, to keep me focused. I'm not saying I never got distracted, because I definitely did, especially during the audiobook recording. I was just like, it didn't help that the damn novel is 82 chapters. And so, yeah, when you're sitting there, it's 3 a.m. and you're on chapter 43 of an 82 chapter book. It does something to your head, y'all. It kind of fucks with you. Yeah. It was like running a marathon. I've run several marathons in my life, and it was the same exact feeling where you're at mile 16, you're hurting, your legs are cramping up, people are passing you, you can barely walk, let alone run, and yeah, you've still got 8 miles to go. It's a long, long way, and those 8 miles were easy in the beginning, but now that you're over halfway through, and the pain has set in, the psychological and physical pain, you're in a bad way. And that's where I was at with this project. It was brutal stuff. But I got through it. And you can too. When it comes to the audiobook, I don't recommend you doing what I did, especially if you don't have experience putting together an audiobook. I mean, I've done a lot of audio work the last few years, several podcasts. I did another audiobook earlier this year. So I know audio. That's the only reason I could do it at the same time, because I was editing the ebook and the print book while producing the audiobook and recording the audiobook. Like, I wasn't using AI or anything. I was recording it sitting here just like I'm recording this podcast right now. And yeah, the audiobook came out to over 15 hours of finished audio, but I can tell you, to get to those 15, it was, I don't know how many hours it was, but it was a lot of fucking hours. It was basically an entire week straight. The last part of this lesson learned is really the publishing machine, and this is getting into just kind of, I'm not going to go too deep into this here, because I do want to do a 2024 wrap where I just reflect on how insane this year has been for me when it comes to writing. But the publishing process, and this is another one of those things where I have a lot of experience doing this now, but having that locked in really helped, because the last day that this was due, I had finished the audiobook, I had finished the ebook, and I had about 3 hours left until the deadline. But then I still needed to do final checks. I needed to get the technicals together. I needed to, fill out. Luckily, because it was pre-order on Amazon, all the details were in there, but I had to upload the book cover, and I had to change the metadata. I had to adjust the blurb. There was all these other small tasks that had to be done that ended up taking about nearly 2 hours for me to finish. But the only reason that I could do it in time is because I'm just familiar with publishing my own stuff. And this is something that's just come from experience. And if you'd like help on actually putting your stuff out, because I feel like this is another, it's intimidating. You know how to write the book, you know how to finish, but then do you know how to format? Do you know how to get it technically, the technicals together to where you can actually put it out the way certain platforms want it? These are all things that I remember just 2 years ago were a mystery to me. I had no idea how to do these things, and it was super intimidating. But I can tell you that it is not that hard. It seems like it's hard because you haven't done it. But once you've done it a few times, it's not too bad. But if you want help, once again, hit me up, keithhayden.net. And I'd be happy to help you actually put your work out there, make it presentable and make it nice. Whew. Man, I'm wrecked. I hope this was helpful. This project, I feel the same way after I finish every project. It's a mix of just pride, and it's a really good feeling knowing that I made it to the other side, that I did what I set out to do. I wrote a good story. I stuck with it, because I think that's the hardest part about writing a novel is it takes a lot of time. And I don't know how many hours I put into Gates of Okinawa, but it's easily in the hundreds of hours, if not 1,000 hours. It's pretty much every day for the last 6 months, either writing or ideating or editing or whatever, or advertising it, talking about it, thinking about it. It's been a lot of work. And I feel that pride. I feel that feeling that, okay, I put something out nice. And especially when I started to, this is the first book that I've written that is specifically tailored to a target demographic. In a way, it is written for market. It is kind of genre fiction, but it's still very literary in the style and the way that it's told. But it's very targeted. It's very deliberate. A lot of stuff that I included, certain decisions with the characters and where they go and who's in there. And when I started telling people yesterday, hey, this novel's out, whatever, yeah, it was a good feeling. There were a lot of people that were interested in reading it. And I can't say that I had that for my first novel or any of the books that I've put out. They've been pretty niche up to this point, and I'm proud of that. But damn, I am tired. I'm officially, I think I'm done for the year. Gates of Okinawa was my 6th book in 2024. It is my final book. I would have put out 6 print books this year, and it's been quite a feat. It's been a road, and yeah, I'm just very tired. But I'm looking forward to coming back in 2025. I've got a lot of plans for next year. Actually, I have less plans for next year, but I have one big one that I'll talk about in a future episode. And if you see me online, you're sure to hear about this amazing project / idea that I plan on undertaking next year. And you know how I do. I'm always pushing my frontier. So it's going to be something crazy, but it's going to be cool. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. My name is Keith Hayden. Once again, if you are interested in a story like Gates of Okinawa, Japanese demons, high school students and their teacher go up against these ferocious foes that stand to take over this island in Japan. And along the way, they go on this incredible journey to face not only the demons, but their own insecurities, their own fears. It's a very human story. I just love telling these stories about the human condition and showing different ways how we can be incredibly weak, but we can also be unimaginably strong. If that's a type of story that you like, and it's also got some cool anime action. If you're into like Stranger Things, so this kind of creepy thing, but like anime style, then you might want to check out Gates of Okinawa. Might be good for you. But that's it for this. I'm going to shut this down. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.